Joanna, Director of Programs. Now, it doesn't matter how good a product or a service is. If the computer says no, then you won't be able to use it. You won't be able to pay using it. And many times regulation, so the rules, have a huge amount to do with what we can and can't do. And the same applies to the area of mobile payments, more specifically, charge to bill, direct carrier billing around the world. I'm going to be joined today by 4 people who have some serious breadth and depth of experience in the whole area of mobile payments and direct carrier billing, and indeed regulation. So joining me first is Joanna Cox. Hi, Joanna.
Hi, James. Can you hear me?
We can.
Good
we can
morning.
hear. We can see you. Good morning. Good morning. So a very warm welcome. Joanna, AIMM, just explain who AIMM is.
Thanks, James. Yeah, AIMM is the UK-based trade association, and our membership consists of all of those in the value chain that go to make the consumer journey. So when you are buying digital goods or services on your phone, that will include the mobile network operators, the intermediaries, and of course the merchants themselves, along with industry support such as anti-fraud, etc.
Fantastic. So AIMM, that's the Association for Interactive Media and Micropayments. I think I got that
right. It is. Thank you for reminding me.
There we go. Fantastic. Nice to have you with us, Joanna. Thank you. Next up, I'd like to introduce Jeremy Flynn from Empello. Hi, Jeremy.
Hi, James.
Hello. So you're the co-founder of Empello. We've got a colleague of yours bookending the day, at the end of the day, looking at what really needs to be done to DCB to make it success it deserves to be. But we'll touch on that later in the session. So could you introduce yourself, your background, Empello, what you do as well?
So I've been in the DCB industry, I suppose, gosh, it must be coming on to 20 years, maybe 15 to 20. I've worked in operators, aggregators, and this year, 10 years ago, we founded Empello, and we focus on fighting fraud in DCB and VAS.
Congratulations. So you're definitely a global concern, and you can very much bring a global view to this.
Indeed.
Lovely. Fantastic. Great having you with us, Jeremy. Thank you very much. And next up, I'd like to introduce David Ashman, who is Head of Compliance with MCP Insight. David, lovely to have you with us. Hi.
Hello, James.
Hi. The same to you, your background, what you've been up to, and because I'm sure there was a life before MCP Insight as well, and what MCP Insight do.
There was. I, in fact, started my career in this particular industry working with AIMM, and then moved across to work in more of the compliance and regulatory side in a more global capacity. Similar to Empello, we are one of the leading monitoring houses globally for the telecom payments industry. Obviously looking across the advertising side to help people understand what the advertising journey is, particularly when they're working with third-party affiliates, but also to make sure that the entire payment flow is protected against fraud. And more recently within the UK specifically, but obviously with opportunities globally to look at the due diligence aspects and to support people with internal and external auditing to understand where their weaknesses may be in how they're delivering compliance within their organisations.
Exactly. So they need to be compliant with the rules and regulations. So you're painfully familiar with the rules and regulations around the world as well. Yeah, great having you with us. Next up, James Barnett, who is 3Pay product executive with, guess who, 3UK. Welcome, James. Great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. A pleasure to be here. Representing 3UK, one of the mobile networks that work closely with all of the other participants in the call. So nice to be here.
Fantastic. So can we just start with Joanna and the rules and regulations around direct carrier billing? Because we're going to be having a lot of viewers of this, whether it's live right now joining us or watching the recording of this session, who may not be familiar with the nuances from country to country, what can and can't be paid for around the world. If you could just let us know what variations we have around the world. Is it physical goods, virtual goods, how much? If you give us a bit of a frame of that, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, of course, James, no problem. As I said, AIMM more UK focused, but I can certainly give you a big flavour of what goes on over here. So the regulator currently is the Phone Paid Services Authority, and they regulate any services which are paid for by your phone, and those are digital goods and services. They're called the PSA. Before that, they were Phone Pay Plus. Before that, I think they were IXDIS. They've had many iterations. They very recently, on the 5th of April, launched their new regulatory handbook, which is called Code 15, which followed Code 14. And it's a very different way of regulating over here. It sets out operational and consumer standards, 7 consumer and 3 operational, that are requirements and obligations that providers through the value chain must adhere to. We've done an awful lot of work around Code 15. We've done lots of best practice documents and guidance that members have access to. But what's coming on the horizon now is actually a change in the handover of regulation. And about this time next year, regulation will be handed from the PSA, who are disbanding, they are being absorbed into Ofcom, who lots of people will have heard of over here, who already have relationships with the mobile network operators, broadcasts, and other players in the value chain. Ofcom, a much bigger organisation, so they have more power, they have more reach, but potentially less specialised knowledge. So it's going to be another consultation will be coming in autumn to decide what the rules and regulations are going to be sort of in a year's time, which we'll be very heavily involved in. But currently it's all about Code 15 and how you meet their regulations.
Okay, Joanna, so up till now, you mentioned things moving and becoming part of Ofcom, moving to Ofcom. If someone stepped out of line, if I was a bad lad and stepped out of line and did something bad practice, what have the consequences been? Has there been fairly rigorous follow-up, or this has been an area where there's needed a tightening up, and as a result, we have this change moving towards Ofcom? What's been the story so far in the UK?
Sure. So the catalyst for this change, James, really is that actually regulation has been extremely rigorous. The PSA over the last few years have very much tightened up the regulation. And actually, as a result of that, complaint numbers have fallen off a cliff. There are very few complaints anymore. And actually, I was recently talking to the Government Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, because they ran a consultation on subscription services in the whole of the UK. So that might be a gym membership or an insurance product or whatever. And they are reconsulting on those subscription services. And when I talked them through what we do as a sector, they were super impressed that we were already ahead of the curve. We're really regulating well in that area. And actually, all the things that they intend to legislate on, we already do. So the move to Ofcom has really come because complaint numbers have come down. So there isn't necessarily the need for that specialist regulator at a fairly high cost any longer. Okay,
great. Thanks, Joanna. Bringing James Barnett in from 3 into the discussion. Can your take on the regulation in the UK, because I don't think what has been mentioned yet so far is that we can't buy physical goods here in the UK yet and add them to our phone bill. There's a kind of greyish area of goods in the middle, such as parking or ticketing, something which is going to be a really fast growing area, being able to pay for your bus and adding that charge to your phone bill. So you've got that you can do here in the UK, but you haven't got the physical goods side of things. So just looking at that, would that change if suddenly, again, James could wave his DCB magic wand and lo and behold, tomorrow we could pay for physical goods using DCB? Would that be a massive step change here in the UK?
I do believe so. And one of the things that we struggle with at Free UK, or that we've been struggling with, is we are a massive sponsor of festivals. Over the summer, we've had so many festivals, from the Isle of Wight to Wireless to Party in the Park, and we've got stands and we've got goods that we want to sell to customers. We want to say, come to the Free store and pay on your mobile phone bill and get a drink or an ice cream. We physically just can't do that, so we're struggling to kind of reach out into the physical goods world. even though I believe this is partly down to the mobile phone operators not wanting to take that risk on goods, like you said in the previous call in Japan, where you can probably go out and buy a TV or put something really elaborate on your phone bill. It's something us as a mobile phone provider is still, I think, a bit wary of. We need to kind of take that risk and say, like, we're happy to take the bad debt. We're happy to maybe put a pizza or a low cost item to start with, and then start to move on. One of the challenges that we have is, as you said, trying to convince ourselves that it will be a good idea, and then getting that merchant to come along on the journey and say, yeah, let's try it. We also have, for instance, if a customer has a high value device, we also set a limit in-house for the first 3 to 6 months on what they can actually spend above their phone bill, because we're protecting that bill shock and that bad debt instance. So the customer in the first 3 to 6 months might think, well, I can only spend a little bit of money on my phone bill. What I'm going to do is actually plug my card in. And then we know as soon as a customer's plugged their card in, we're fighting that battle.
It's a tough tightrope for you operators to traverse. Really tough tightrope. And I appreciate that. Bringing Jeremy in from Empello, looking at the world and where DCB really is used heavily, does it all come down to that being able to pay for physical goods using direct carry billing, or is it wider than that?
I think it's much wider than that, but let's return to the topic of physical goods in Europe. Up till Brexit, this was regulated by the e-money regulations, and the mobile operators have chosen not to get an e-money license. So tickets and parking are allowed after a lot of arguing. A waiver was given for these virtual goods, but the operators have not submitted their businesses to get an e-money license. So that's the main issue there.
Okay.
So outside of Europe, there isn't a lot of, I'm not sure about Southeast Asia, but in Africa, Middle East, there really isn't there's no regulation that I'm aware of that says you can't use physical goods, that you can't buy physical goods. It is simply not being used. And I suspect it's down to economics and payment times. So if you, obviously a merchant gets 95, 96, 97% of a credit card fee and gets paid within a couple of days. In the Middle East, you'll be lucky to get 50 or 60%. And if you get it within 3 months, you're doing well. So there's a lot of actions that the operators need to take to get the mechanic used more.
So the commercial model. So when it comes to the commercial model side of things, do the regulators have a say in that as well? They don't have a say. They cannot. No. There's no regulator out there that specifies a guideline of what can be charged to affect that payment or not via DC.
The revenue share is not regulated in any country that I'm aware of.
Okay.
It's a specific policy of individual operators, and we've seen in the past operators think it's a good idea to reduce revenue share, but all it does is to change the economics of advertising. So whereas in the past, for example, one could use relatively expensive but safe Google advertising, if revenue share is reduced, only cheap, dodgy affiliate traffic can be used and the economics still remain. So the revenue share impacts an awful lot of things.
Yeah. So the commercial model, we're finding that indeed we've got 2 working groups in MEF looking at SMS commercial models. We're actually meeting on Thursday, and they did RCS commercial models. So, okay, yeah, we clearly see that and understand that across MEF. Bringing yourself, David, into the equation, can you go too far with regulation so far that you actually end up stifling the market? And have you got any examples of that or any personal experiences of that at all in the past where the regulations have gone too far? Because we appreciate that. And I know personally from having dealt with South Africa before, mentioned we had that session yesterday looking at telecoms fraud, of course, including payments across South Africa. And I did some work in South Africa several years ago in that specific area. and fraud was absolutely rampant and rife. And since then, things have tightened up quite a bit. So what are you seeing around the world? And is there a risk of a knee-jerk reaction just stifling the market?
I think there's always that risk, James. I mean, the UK is probably the best case study we have. Mobile payments have been here longer than most other jurisdictions. And we've been through the entire cycle of a boom and bust. And hopefully we're at the stage of being able to grow again. But there is a lot of risk in the market from getting regulations wrong. What we've always advocated is that now is the time in those less regulated markets to think about sensible self-regulation and get it right, learning from the UK, doing the right thing. It's very tempting when there's no regulation to go out and make it a Wild West and make a lot of quick bucks quickly, but then destroy the longevity of the market. So that's the recommendation, is think about doing things in a sustainable way, learn from the UK. And in fact, self-regulation does work better. We've seen that we've been able to reduce the complaints substantially by the mobile networks taking a proactive regulatory response themselves in the UK and achieved far better consumer outcomes than the regulator has over the decade or so that I've been involved with it. So there is some real positives from self-regulation, and there are some real risks from if a government or a regulator sees a market out of control and jumps in with big boots, stifling innovation.
Yeah, look what happened to the premium market in the US a number of years ago. Yeah. So that's a perfect example of that. So Joanna, going back to yourselves, David was talking about the great work done by mobile operators in the UK. You obviously, as an organisation, have the UK as members and many other stakeholders across the UK business. What kind of things are you doing, or what initiatives do you have within AIMM for helping to secure this market? Because as David touched on quite correctly, if you have this element of self-regulation, therefore isn't necessarily the need for the government or the regulator to step in and as a result become possibly a little heavy-handed.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, James. You've hit the nail on the head there. And actually, I was talking with Ofcom only the other day to really sort of drive home the amount that the industry and AIMM have done in terms of self-regulation to really raise standards over the last few years and actually change the landscape of our sector. So, you talked about the network operators and all the work they've done on the security framework and on their codes of practice. As AIMM, we've got a regulatory analysis working group which looks at adjudications and works out, helps industry identify, mitigate risk and avoid pitfalls by sort of self-serving. We have a internal standards external education group which works on trying to really raise standards and put best practice out there. So we've distributed best practice guidance on customer care, which is a new standard in Code 15 in the UK. Also vulnerable persons documentation and templates, which is a brand new standard here in the UK. Due diligence templates. And one of the biggest things to come out of our IC group was probably our consumer education website called phonecharges.org, which actually helps consumers if they've got something on their bill that they just don't understand. It gives them information, but it also helps them locate the merchant and actually deal with their query before it sort of gets to a regulatory arena. What we were finding is consumers just simply didn't really understand the process and the value chain. So we wanted to put something together which would just help them do that. And we've been talking to Ofcom about, how they can hopefully help support phone charges going forwards in terms of consumer education, and how, because we've self-regulated so much, actually potentially we can recraft a bit of Code 15 and they might be able to be slightly lighter touch and reduce their operational burden when they take over next July.
Fantastic. So Code 15 seems like something that other countries could do with having a real close look at, and probably copying your homework. Nothing wrong with that when it comes to protecting consumers.
They could do far worse.
They could do far worse by the sounds of it. James, bringing yourself in. Obviously, we're talking about regulation here, but if we look at the analyst presentation from Guillermo from Omdia. We look at my discussion with MEF CEO Dario Betti before that. Consumers, they don't want to be worried about a payments charge. They want to feel safe. What have you at 3UK been doing to actually help protect consumers from within the processes you have for the customer experience? Could be your contact centers, could be anything like that. What have you practically been doing?
So a good question and quite a big answer from me. We've actually gone from top to bottom with our DCB service. We've rebranded our service, and it's now called Free Pay. It's got a dedicated website and a dedicated FAQ section for customers to come and see exactly what Free Pay is, how it can help you, what merchants we've got associated to our product. We've gone through our actual merchants list as well, and we've been really quite strict. We've terminated and moved a lot of the players in the market that were bad boys and services that we didn't really want to be associated with Free. And as Joanna said, we're lucky that we're only receiving around 1,000 complaints a year now. We've done a lot of good work at Free to make sure that we've got really safe aggregators, really safe code of practice ourselves, really stringent, and we work with the audit houses to want whoever we onboard, it goes through a very rigorous service. We've also worked on little things, educational videos on our website, and we've also opened up our bespoke call centre for DCB. We're the only mobile network with a bespoke contact centre that deals with direct carrier billing queries. We actually put it in our error messages, and we put the contact telephone number on the actual SMS receipt that customers receive. So we're actually signposting customers who have an issue or have a query to a dedicated agent who is trained to actually deal with it. So
that's fantastic, because that's super important. Actually, within the DCB for Growth working group within MEF, we as members are actually working on that exact area, the customer experience after Absolutely. The initial purchase. What do we need to do next? And we're bringing mobile operators into that discussion as well. Just for reference, I've got to be quick here, and obviously I'm going to bring you, Jeremy, in next on this discussion here. But you mentioned 1,000 complaints a year or 1,000 issues a year. Can you say what it was at before all of this?
It was around 12,000.
Wow. Okay, so you've reduced it to 8%.
Yeah, exactly. Luckily enough, I was working at the regulatory body, so taking that experience of what customers complain about, we were able to feed back through AIMM, through the working bodies, and do some work with the PSA and the mobile operators. We tightened up our operation, which therefore led to a drop in complaints about the most complained services. So we either said clean up your act or you're out, and most of the players decided to clean up their act. So it was a collaborative effort.
Fantastic, thank you. Jeremy, over to Empello, bringing your global experience into play. I know it's shocking, we're just a few minutes away from the close and we're nearly there, but from your perspective, how should regulators approach direct carrier billing? What should they be doing globally? Again, if everyone could do what you said, what should they be doing in the next year from a regulation perspective?
I think it varies so much around the world as to the individual operators' view on balance between revenue and customer complaints. There still remains operators that are driven by revenue, and from that, customer complaints are very high. On the other hand, you have customer complaints as the key metric, and revenues fall away because of very tight regulation. So I would argue the UK has been overly regulated, particularly for subscription services. And what was once a vibrant, healthy market with not that much fraud, frankly, has been practically killed. The new payment flow mandated by the regulator has taken a market which had about 25, 30 active merchants of subscription services down to 1. So it's a bit like Thatcher flying over the deserts and saying or something. It's a sort of story like something. There's no inflation there, but there's no economic activity. So there's no complaints about subscription services in the UK because there is no activity. So I don't think the UK is a best practice exemplar.
Okay.
I actually think that the work that the Orange Group is doing in West Africa, they're the dominant sort of regional operator in those countries, is about right. They're proactive. They regulate. They want things under control. They understand they need to keep things under control. Otherwise, as David said, things go bang and pop. So what would my message be is give the operators a go to do it and let the regulator step in if it starts to go wrong. Let the regulator step in only if it goes wrong. But again, we see that in the Middle East. So they mandated the OTP PIN. Advertising costs there are cheaper than Europe, so that's the merchants still were able to do stuff. But now en masse in the GCC countries anyway, header enrichment's being removed. So consumers now have to manually type in their phone number, receive a PIN, and then enter the PIN in a
So the whole payment process for the uninitiated is being slowed up.
This has been mandated not by the operators, but by the regulators.
Yeah.
So I don't know what got in their heads that they need to do that.
Okay, thank you. So regulation has the ability to kill the market. So a light touch at best, going back to what Joanna said, ultimately the self-regulation, allowing the freedom for mobile operators with
the probes applied by a regulator and some limits as to when things need to be tightened up.
When they need to step in. David, closing remarks based on the back of that and what Jeremy said. Do you agree actually about what he said about the UK? Things have gone too far.
I agree. There's certainly two aspects where it's gone too far. That's the level of fines, because even those trying to do the right thing are so petrified of getting £250,000 fine for a slight misdemeanor that they just don't enter the market at all. The other area is, of course, some of the more subjective interpretations of how big price needs to be, how it needs to be designed on the page, and trying to make sure there is a consistency across all of the networks that is getting that balance right. And that is something that I think you're always continuing to review and work on to make sure that you're getting the right outcome. But the important thing is obviously people need to understand what the standards are, because there's nothing more annoying than designing something in good faith and then having your service ripped out of the market when you've invested the money into the advertising and promotion of it.
Okay, thank you very much. So just to summarize, ideally self-regulation, only the regulator needs to come in if things are really stepping out of line, and then don't go overboard. And to start off with, when regulation is being put in place, don't make it too overreaching, don't make it too onerous, because as David just mentioned, it puts people off from even trying to do the right thing because you're thinking it's not even worth it. So regulation is a key aspect, not just in the adoption of direct carrier billing, but of course in messaging globally and so many different areas. I'd like to thank Joanna from AIMM. Thank you very much. Jeremy Flynn from Empello. We're going to be having your colleague Louise Ford on later in the day as well. David Asham from MCP Insight. And indeed, David, we're going to be having a colleague of yours, Toby Padgham, as well along. And James Barnett. We need the operators to be part of this discussion. We absolutely need them. And thank you for joining today. Much appreciated. So thank you all. That's been a discussion about regulation in the area of direct carrier billing. And join us next for the whole area of subscriptions and how important it is to drive DCB. Thank you.